Hey, I'm here with Charlie Alcock at Victory Mountain Camp. And you know, Charlie, one of the things that I hear from youth pastors is they have experiences with their students, amazing experiences at camp like this. Yeah. And they come back, and the question that's on their mind is, how do I help my students make it more than a moment, more than just one experience with Jesus at camp into a lifetime? So my first question is, what are the barriers that you see and that you hear about from students as they come back from camp?
Well, I'll start right away, even the conversations I've had at this camp this week, and it's the same I have heard over a long period of youth ministry, that the first, I think, massive barrier is that maybe God isn't where I live. Like, the only place that God resides is at camp. Because at camp is where I feel the emotion. At camp is where I feel accepted. At camp is where I can worship freely. At camp, people are with me 24/7. At camp, people are always telling me how great I am. At camp, people are believing in me. I mean, that's the way it was for me, Clay. I mean, I associated God's presence with a camp up in Michigan called Wesleyan Woods. It was like where I could actually be a Christian for at least a week. Because when I went home, it's like I didn't feel the same. And I didn't understand that the commitments that I were making, that I was like diving into, that meant so much to me, was a spiritual commitment that was separated from the way I feel or my emotions. And that's what's such a big deal on that book, More Than a High. That's the title is a metaphor of a roller coaster. I was told as a kid coming back from camp, almost yelled at by my pastor, that's like, get off the roller coaster, stop riding a roller coaster. And I didn't know how. And it wasn't until I'm a college student. I actually had a class with a psychology professor named Dr. Betty Jane Frasky. And I remember talking to her, and she explained that you're always going to be on the roller coaster emotionally, socially, physically, all those things. There's nothing you can do about it because it's a part of being a human. I mean, you can be following, Christ with all your heart, mind, and soul, and you wake up one day and you don't feel the emotion, or you don't feel connected, or you're dealing with depression or some type of anxiety or whatever the case. And she made it clear that you've got to separate the power and the presence of Christ, this truth, and the emotion, that they're separate. So while this is happening in your life and you're all over the map, it doesn't mean you're not consistent in Christ. You just need to learn the difference between the two. And for me, that's a big part of it, is helping our students understand that there's parts of you that are going to be a mess, emotionally, physically, socially. But that doesn't mean that Christ is not there with you, in you. And it's his power in you. So recognize the difference between your life and connection to Jesus Christ and the body, that can be consistent even though everything else is all over the map.
I've struggled with what it looks like to be at a camp that's amazing, where God is present. But there's also lights and flash, and amazing things, fun things that my youth group did not have when I came back. Yeah. And then in youth ministry going, man, I can't be as relevant as that speaker. That speaker is amazing. Or the way that they were able to connect with my students, I feel like, how do I do that? What would you tell to youth pastors who are struggling with the comparison and believing that God is gonna connect with their students when they come back to the normal rhythms?
That's a really, really good question. I was driving to work one day, driving to school, and I was listening to ESPN, like sports radio, and it was a show called Mike and Mike in the Morning. And basically, I heard him say, Mike Golick to Mike Greenberg, comparison is the thief of joy. And it's like, that's exactly right. Now, I know probably other people have heard it in class or some other biblical source, but mine was sports radio.
Yeah.
Comparison is the thief of joy. And that, I think, is the key at camp. Like for me as a speaker or the band or the leadership, is constantly pointing that camp isn't the end of the ministry year. It's not the apex of the ministry year. It's just the catalyst and the beginning of what is next. So for me, youth camp is the beginning of youth ministry year. It's where we can launch students out. It's where we spend so much time with them. We have about 124 hours isolated with students at camp. You don't get 124 hours in 7-8 months past camp. And so I think what you do is constantly talk about what's next. This guy who built Animal Kingdom down in Florida, his name is Michael Lingerfeld, he would say, you have to help people see the future. I think part of what we do as camp, as speakers, leaders, is help everybody see the future, even the pastors and the leaders. The vast majority of leaders here are not full-time pastors, they're volunteers. How do we empower them to say, listen, and we tell this to the students, what you have here is just something unique. This is not reality. I'm using the metaphor as a mountaintop, thinking about Moses, the second time that he went up and brought back the tablets, and that he was with God and his face shone, in Exodus 34, for example. And it's like, we're on the mountaintop, but you don't live here. It's where you get some great word. It's where things miraculously happen. But the true depth of ministry is in the valley, where you live with them. So I feel that we constantly push towards that. We constantly celebrate going back to their home church. We constantly celebrate their local leader, whether they're full-time pastor or not. And that's what I do as a speaker. So it's important to not think of the comparison and recognize this is a moment that's gonna help move my ministry forward, and not to compare. So we don't have to negate the great stuff that we have here. It's just for a moment. But if we associate what God is doing with this place and with these people, that's where we fail. We have to help them understand, even in those critical moments, like we had those moments the last 2 nights here, and when people were making commitments, it was critical as I gave that invitation that they didn't pray with me, they prayed with the leaders who brought them. And then when people felt like a call to the next steps, how they're going to lead in their home churches, it wasn't about my relationship with the students, it was now meet with all of your leaders and talk to them and process with them. So we had to be intentional about pushing back to the local church on what's next with the leaders. So for example, this week I meet every morning with all the leaders for an hour talking about this very same thing, how we're gonna do that. And then I reinforce it when we speak to the students at night and help them understand that, the greatest people in their lives that are at this camp are the leaders who brought them to camp. And that is how we'll celebrate at the end of camp. We're going to celebrate the leaders from their home church. They are the heroes. They're the ones who are going to walk with them and be there. And so it's intentional, very intentional.
Another group that I think about are the students who have made a faith decision. And maybe that is faith in Jesus for the first time, or calling in a ministry, marketplace, vocational. And so how, as youth pastors, what are some best practices for us to equip students to be faithful in the daily grind of school, of the relationships, of work? What are ways that we can help equip students to be faithful in their decisions they've made here?
I think first one is you have to constantly repeat. It has to be something you constantly bring back to them. So I like this idea of repeat, rehearse, and review. And basically it's like, hey, let's go back and celebrate what God did and remind them of the amazing things that happened. So it's constantly bringing back to their memory. Bro, we do this in sports all the time. When our team finally makes it or wins a championship, I mean, it can be 30 years since the last time they won, but we constantly go back and remember and talk about it. Why can't we do that in relationship with Jesus? And so I think we go back and we help them remember. We repeat, this is what God did. We remind them God was faithful there. But then the next step is, as we're moving forward, it's allowing them to have opportunities to exercise that spiritual muscle. Find ways to give them something to do with it, to share, to exercise it. Find ways within the youth ministry context or in the church context, where there can be consistent opportunities for them to take next steps. And then I would say this, there has to be consistency. Like if we want a culture that is amazing in youth ministry, it begins with consistent connections. We consistently meet. We consistently say, hey, this is what we're going to do. We're going to go through this book of the Bible every week. You need to be here. Give them a reason to be a part of it. And consistently pour into them, pointing to what is next, pointing to what can happen. You know, and then last thing I would say is, for your local youth ministry at camp is pretty amazing because it's so big, the vision for the camp, what it is. You have to give them something to fight for in their local ministry. Come up with a theme for that year. Come up with a way to say, this is where we're headed. Help them see the future. They need that. I remember a pastor not too far from here in Atlanta, Georgia, all right, Kevin Meyer, who would say, God sees tomorrow like we see yesterday. We have to help them see tomorrow. Not easy, but it's something we can do, because if you believe that you can be a part of something amazing, if you believe that there's more, that God has more, then you're willing to fight for it.
I'm sure there are some pastors, some volunteers listening right now who are saying, like, this is speaking to my heart. Where can they go to dive deeper into these questions, into resources? Spoiler, I think you've written some. Please, man, tell us about where they can go.
So for me, for a longest time, and I've been in it for 35 years, so it's like, I remember, you know, whether I was in Virginia, Indiana, or California, or back in Indiana, that I would find resources that made sense for my ministry. I remember I would buy certain books, and then I would cut out parts of them and only use sections. And so there's so many great resources that are available anymore through different curricula that exist out there. I would say this a lot when you were in class with me, but like information, you can glean and Google information with your iPhone. Understanding only comes through suffering. And I struggled after camp. That's why I came up with this book called More Than a High, basically based on that roller coaster illustration. Yeah. So I did 8 chapters with study questions to make it very simple to say, here's 8 things that we struggle with after camp. And that was that book, More Than a High. And then a bunch of pastors were using it, and it made it really accessible and very affordable. And then I came out with a second book called Beyond the Moment. Same thing, 8-week series on how do you go deeper, I would say Beyond the Moment actually is deeper spiritual formation. More Than a High is like a surface, especially for students who just made commitments and they're not used to going deeper in things. That it's that kind of book. Beyond the Moment is deeper spiritual formation, but it's just a resource to help people grasp principles. So if they read the chapter, which would only take them 8 minutes, and they can look at the study questions they can do in a group.
Love it.
Yeah, because we talk about we're calling people up, you know, to stand up for Christ. We're calling people together. This is central where we have community. We have to have community. So if we're calling them up or out to follow Jesus, and then we're calling them to be together, we're also sending them forth, and we're sending them to their schools. You know, so we have to equip them for those zones as well. So I think it's that beautiful blend of those two. Those 2 resources are just 2 simple ones, but the market, I think, is way flooded with some great options anymore that will help us, that fit our specific ministry, and that fit your specific students, because they're not all the same.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Charlie. Those resources are linked below the video. Please check them out. Thank you so much. This has been so good.
I love it, and praying for you all as you do this. These are great days. I'll just tell you this. I'm in conversations with people that are doing camps all over the country. One of my dear friends is in Africa right now. God is moving in some miraculous ways, Clay. I mean, miraculous. And so these are great days for us to have ministry with this generation. Yeah. God's going to use them in incredible ways. He already is. So I'm just proud to be a part of it.
Yeah, it's good days.
Yeah.
Amen.
Good days for sure. Boom.